Hey everybody, what's going on? It's your boy Edo the Rocket here. It's time to do a Games Haul video. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's time for another Games Haul video. Now, before I kick things off today, I just wanted to say a very big thank you to everybody that checked out my last video. I only ever started up this channel with an intention of making a small YouTube channel, making videos for a couple of friends. And to see that last video tick over a couple of hundred views is a lovely surprise and very gratifying. So if you're one of those people, thank you very much for checking that out. Now, I just wanted to share with you guys the gaming pickups that I've had from the last 2 or 3 months. I've got a ton of great games I'm excited to show you, as well as a couple of hardware pickups, which might be some of my favorites of 2022. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right in, kicking things off with the Arcade1Up Outrun cab, which you can see over my shoulder just to the side there. Now, I wasn't ever planning on picking up this particular cab. Arcade1Up products, when they come to Australia, they tend to get marked up pretty drastically in price. They're often double the price of what you get in the US market, even allowing for currency conversion. But I was very, very lucky and managed to get a working unit of Outrun at a very, very steep discount, and I'm super glad I did. This cab is really, really well put together. The steering wheel feels great. I think the decal, the artwork on the system really pops, and it's got that lovely Outrun marquee across the top as well, which I think really, really looks sharp. Now, the cab comes with 5 games, including 3 Outrun games, which is Outrun, Turbo Outrun, and Outrunners. I was most familiar with Outrun, but I've ended up spending most of my time playing the 3rd game, Outrunners. It really feels like that was the game where Sega took everything they learned from the first 2 games and really honed their craft and took it to the next level. Just has the most satisfying sense of speed. The drifting feels really, really tight, and I love the variety of locations that you can drive to. Outrunners is one of my favorite old games that I have discovered in 2022. The next thing I wanted to show you guys is the red Nintendo Wii that they released for the 25th anniversary of Mario. This one was a hand-me-down from my sister-in-law. She's not a particularly big gamer, so this system has actually barely been used. It's actually complete in box, still has all of the cables and packaging and everything like that. But I was actually really happy with it. I think if you check it out as color variants go, I think that red is really, really striking, and it's kind of neat to have this particular variant. Nintendo Wii's are super cheap as consoles go. There's actually 4 variants in total, including the white, black, blue, and this red version here. So I might see if I can actually try and pick up the blue and black one and complete the set. We'll see how we go. The next thing I wanted to show you guys is the Sega Megadrive Classic. Now, you might remember I actually picked up a Sega Megadrive in my last video, and I've been enjoying playing Megadrive games so much that I thought this would actually be a pretty easy way to play through some of the biggest hits on the system. Now, with the PlayStation Classic and the Super Nintendo Classic, they only had 20 games on there, so they were, of course, missing some of the bigger hits on the system. I think this Mega Drive version, which comes with 40 games, is a really, really comprehensive package. And this system actually goes for quite a lot online if you check on eBay these days. So I just happened to come across a complete boxed copy that was selling for the original retail price. So I was very, very happy with that and have been enjoying digging my way through some of the classic games on the system. The next game I wanted to show you guys is Predator Concrete Jungle for the PS2. Now, I've been in a bit of a Predator kick this year. I really enjoyed that new version, a new installment of the Predator franchise called Prey. You can find it on Disney+. But I've also been watching the original couple of films as well. And Predator Concrete Jungle, as you can probably tell, takes after the Predator 2 film, where it's set in an urban environment. Predator as a character, I think, is just super fun to play in a video game format. He has so many fun and entertaining weapons and abilities in his arsenal. So a game like this that lets you take those abilities and lets you lay waste to a bunch of goons on the street, I think is just the perfect setup for a fun and straightforward video game, and that's exactly what this is. It was one of those games that came out relatively late in the lifespan of the PS2, so it was something that I'd overlooked previously, but I think it's a thoroughly entertaining game, and if you're anything like me and just in the mood for more Predator, this is the game for you. Now, the next one I wanted to show you guys, this was a PS3 game on a franchise that I hadn't really played too much of in the past, and that is Motorstorm. So this is the second game in the series, Pacific Rift, and you know what? As arcade races go, this was a ton of fun. I remember the original game in this series copped a bit of heat because it was one of those launch games of the PS3 where people felt like it perhaps didn't match up to the graphical quality of the trailers that they showed beforehand, and maybe that sort of cast a bit of a shadow over the game. And it's a pity because playing this particular entry here, I think this game is a ton of fun. The environments look really, really great. I think the Pacific coastal setting is a really fun one. It plays great. The handling of both the cars and the motorbikes, super satisfying. And it just has a ton of content on there. There's loads of tracks. I think they get the balance of the difficulty just right. And if you're in the mood for an arcade racer and have a PS3, this is a fantastic game that you can pick up, and you can actually get it really cheap as well. So highly recommended. The next game I want to show you guys is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, in a year where so many high-profile games got delayed, developer Monolith Studios must be one of the most efficient in the industry because they actually brought forward the release date of their game by 3 months, and they did so with no shortcuts taken. This has to be one of their biggest RPGs to date. It's an interesting storyline that mixes I would say Blade Runner with Groundhog Day. So it tells the story of a group of synthetic soldiers that are bred for war that have an artificially short lifespan. And it explores what happens when a group of them become self-aware of the fact that they're these cogs in the machine, and what happens when they bust out and try and create a life for their own. The Xenoblade Chronicles series, I've always admired it. It has a very unique combat system that I haven't really seen any other JRPG try and iterate upon. The worlds are always vast, expansive, fun to explore, and I think this game, to my mind, has probably one of the best storylines in the series to date. So in a year where the Nintendo Switch has had so many terrific games, I think Xenoblade Chronicles 3 stands tall as one of the best of the best. Definitely worth checking out. Okay, and the next set of games I wanted to show you guys is a bunch of 360 games that I picked up from a local flea market. I came across a guy that was selling them at $2 a pop. I didn't happen to own any of them, so I thought I would roll the dice and give them a go. So I've got in front of me here Diablo IV, the Ultimate Edition, a Sega Superstar tennis game, Injustice Game of the Year Edition, and Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Just going through them quickly, so starting off with Diablo 3, being predominantly a console player, I have never actually played a Diablo game before, and so this is my first opportunity to jump in. Haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I look forward to seeing what it's all about, and my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is sort of the last of the Diablo franchise under Blizzard in its heyday, and my understanding is what the direction they've sort of taken since this game is quite different, so it'll be interesting to see what I make of this game. The Sega Superstar tennis game, I really like this one, and I'm sorry I overlooked it back in the day. It actually plays really, really similarly to the Virtua tennis games, also made by Sega, which I love, but then it's overlaid with a roster that has some of their best characters from the past games, including your Monkey Ball characters, Sonic, Jet Set Radio, and that kind of thing. Really straightforward, but also really like it for what it is. I'm a big fan of the NetherRealm games, and so this is the original Injustice game. If you don't know, the storyline for this one is the Joker tricks Superman into killing Lois Lane, which drives him insane and makes him the central villain for the game. And then you've just got a roster of those DC superheroes taking him on. I really love the NetherRealm games. I think they have terrific story modes. I think the fighting game engine has great graphics, solid gameplay. This one I expect to be no different, and being the Game of the Year edition, it's kind of neat that you've got the whole lot of extra DLC characters that they'd released are also bundled into this one as well. And lastly, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. This franchise originally got its start as a platformer on the Nintendo 64, but then Rare kind of took a swing for the fences with Nuts and Bolts and went in a completely different direction and made this a, I don't even know what you call it. It's kind of like a construction game where you build together crafts to try and complete these objectives. I'm only a little of the way through, but I'm sort of really just getting a feel for it so far. But it's another game that's sort of interested me from afar. I've just never had a chance to play it, so I look forward to sort of getting my feet wet and giving it more of a go. So yeah, for $2 a go, very happy with those pickups. The next game I wanted to show you guys now. This is a couple of PS4 games that came out at the launch of that system, which, if you can believe it, was nearly 10 years ago. So I'm talking about Killzone Shadowfall and also The Order 1886. Now, these games, I think, are very quintessentially launch games insofar as they are designed to be graphical showcases for the system, but in order to get them out for launch, they tend to be games that actually have a pretty short overall running time. Starting with The Order 1886, this was made by Ready at Dawn Studios, and I think it's a really cool concept. It's a steampunk game set in the Victorian era, and it is a pretty run-of-the-mill cover shooter, but I think the star of the show is the setting and the world building that they're doing here. As I said, it kind of copped a bit of flack for the overall duration of the game, but I think visiting it now in 2022, it's fun to just sort of play a game like this where you can get in, get out, and sort of see the whole thing in just a handful of hours. And I think the great thing about games like this and Killzone is that they go for super duper cheap. So if you want to play these kind of games now, I picked these ones up from EB Games, and they cost me less than $10 each, which I was very happy with. Killzone Shadowfall as well. I'm only sort of slightly familiar with the Killzone franchise. I played the original one and Killzone 2, but this particular version passed me by. I've had a chance to fire it up, and the introductory sequence looks really great. I think, again, the game's designed to show off what the PS4 can do, so it's a game that's it's a shooter, but it's sort of quite heavily focused on set pieces and trying to create a bit of spectacle. So coming back and revisiting it now, I'm kind of enjoying it for what it is. It's a pretty straightforward game, pretty simple mechanically, but also a ton of fun as well. The next game I wanted to show you guys is Bloodstone 007 for the PS3. Now, this, I think, is one of the most underrated James Bond games ever to be released. It came out in a very crowded release calendar all the way back in the holiday season of 2010, and I think it got overlooked for a lot of bigger games that were out at the time. And in fact, it wasn't even the only James Bond game to come out in its month. It also almost had to compete with its own audience because there was a re-released new version of GoldenEye that came out around the same time. And it's a pity because this particular game here, it's made by Bizarre, who were the studio that made the Project Gotham racing games. It's a studio with a great pedigree, and this particular game, they came up with an original storyline, which I think is actually probably the best way to go with these kinds of things. And they actually managed to get not only Daniel Craig, but even Judi Dench turns up in this particular game. It has a story mode that sort of is the sort of that same compact sort of length that you get with, let's say, like a Call of Duty campaign mode. It's filled with a similar kind of spectacle, and I think it does a really good job of capturing the essence of what you would want in a James Bond game. There's some really, really terrific driving sequences, which are very, very well done, as you would imagine, from the pedigree of the studio. And on top of that, the actual the mixture of the combat and the action set pieces really make it a game that you know, if it was released almost at any other time, you think it would have actually had a pretty good shot at finding an audience. So it's kind of a pity that it got overlooked. But going back to it, I think it still holds up really great. So if you are in the mood for a James Bond game and you have never tried it before, I can highly recommend Bloodstone. I think it's a great one. The next game I wanted to show you guys is Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. Now, this game came out for the Nintendo DS, and I want to say one of the things that happens is when you have a system like the DS that gets as popular as it did, you know, where they sold hundreds of millions of units of that thing, it means that the audience for that system is so large that I feel like publishers are more inclined to roll the dice and sign off on some unusual projects, and that's exactly what this game is. It is one of the weirdest ideas for a game that I can think of. So basically it is developed by BioWare, which obviously is the studio that, you know, they're the makers of games like the Mass Effect series or the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and somehow you've got them making an RPG for the Nintendo DS, and not only any old RPG, a Sonic RPG. So a character that's normally, you know, renowned for, you know, fast gameplay, zipping around environments, you now have in a turn-based RPG. And look, does it work? Probably not really, but I just like how weird the concept is that somebody just really shot the moon on that one and sort of thought, hey, what if we just really leaned hard into the story elements of a Sonic game, and instead of having him move around in environments, it's just turn-based combat. I like how weird it is, and yeah, that's one of the best things I actually think about the Nintendo DS. It's a system that has a Wizard of Oz RPG on there, and you know, one of the most popular games is about petting cats and dogs, and you know, that's the beauty of the system, and it's such a weird novelty of a game. I'm happy to have my hands on it. I've played a couple of hours on it, and man, it is as weird and strange as you would think, but you know what, that's what I signed up for, and that's what I got. The next games I wanted to show you guys is a pair of PS3 games, and that is the Sly Cooper Trilogy in HD, and also Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. Now, the Sly Cooper games were very popular back in their heyday in the PS2 and the PS3, but the developer Sucker Punch has gone on to produce a mega hit in its own right with the Ghost of Tsushima franchise, and they recently confirmed online that they're going all in on that game in the future, which means it's effectively these two games at the end of the road for the Sly series. These games are obviously only going to become increasingly more scarce once the PlayStation Store delists the PS3 games at some point in the future, so I just wanted to go back and pick these games up before they became too hard to come by. I think they hold up great. As far as mascot platformers go, their general nature can be a little bit dime a dozen, but the stealth mechanic that you get with the Sly Cooper games, I think, just provides a little bit of extra variety to the games. And the game that was built from the ground up for the PS3, Thieves in Time, as the name would suggest, it sort of takes you through a variety of locations through the time traveling mechanic, which then also, I think, just gives the game a little bit of extra variety and spice, which I really enjoyed. The next game I picked up is Splatoon 3 for the Nintendo Switch. I could not be happier for Nintendo that the Splatoon series has found the audience that it has gone on to have with Splatoon 3. I can remember playing the original game back on the Wii U, and as everyone knows, that is a system that bombed really hard, and it really bummed me out because I remember enjoying the game, wanting to talk to other people about it, and no one I knew at the time was playing this thing. Obviously, the series has just gone from strength to strength, and this new version has seen the series really hit new heights. It is an iteration on Splatoon 2, don't get me wrong, it plays pretty similar to that game, but it really is the perfect sort of online shooting game as seen through the eyes of Nintendo. If you were going to make a family-friendly version of this genre, I think Nintendo have really hit the nail on the head with the Splatoon series. You know, with these games, it never really matters whether you are good at shooting and taking down your opponents, because the name of the game, of course, is to just splat the arena with ink that represents your team's color. And I find that no matter what your ability level, you will have fun playing this game. It is just such a joy to play, and the presentation is just so standout. The music is terrific. The art design of the characters is memorable. You know, it really deserved a chance to shine, and I'm glad that after an inauspicious start on the Wii U, it's gone on to just become the absolute juggernaut that it is. Splatoon 3, I love this game. It's everything I wanted it to be, and I know I'll continue to put a ton of hours into this thing. Next game I wanted to show you guys was Soul Calibur 4. Now, the Soul Calibur franchise was, I think, hit its height back in the day on the Dreamcast when it was a real graphics showcase. It's probably not the game that it was nowadays. You know, the most recent one kind of came and went. Soul Calibur 4 was probably one of the last times that I put a decent amount of time into the series. If you remember, they released two versions. There was a 360 version that had Yoda and a PS3 version that had Darth Vader. You can actually get each of the characters as DLC. And you know what, Soul Calibur 4 I think is a pretty solid game. Pretty straightforward. It's if you like the series, I think this is a pretty solid iteration, and this was just one that I was happy to pick up and fill out in my PS3 library. Now, the next batch of games I wanted to show you guys are ones for the Nintendo 3DS. Over the course of 2022, I've been busily working my way through the gaps in my collection where I wanted to pick up these games before they get too scarce. And obviously, next year with the closure of the Nintendo eShop, the prices of these games are only going to go up. So I've just been scrambling to try and get the last of my collection, and I'm pretty happy with what I've got at this stage. So I'll start first of all with Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. So this was the last game that I was needing in my collection of Mario & Luigi RPGs for the Nintendo 3DS. It is a remake of the very first Mario and Luigi game, which originally came out on the Game Boy Advance. This new version here, it has the Bowser's Minion storyline added on there, and as well as that, a few quality of life improvements, as well as a graphical tweak. I really enjoyed this series, really happy to be able to complete the set. And yeah, this was a game that I haven't actually had a chance to play all the way through to the end yet, so it's finally a chance for me to do so. Okay, the next pair of games I wanted to show you guys was the Dragon Quest games, Dragon Quest VII and Dragon Quest VIII for the Nintendo 3DS. Now, the Dragon Quest series has been a staple in Japan for many years. It is, in fact, older than the Final Fantasy series, and for quite a long period of time was the more popular series in Japan as well. For me, it took a very long time to finally get a chance to experience the series. I got my start with Dragon Quest 11, which I played on the PS4, and I've absolutely fallen in love with the series, and I've been working my way through collecting the games in the backlog. These 3DS versions of Dragon Quest VII and Dragon Quest VIII, I think, are generally regarded as the best way to play these games. 7 originally came out on the PS1, and Dragon Quest VIII originally came out on the PS2. But these two versions of the games, they have just added a whole bunch of quality of life improvements to them. The kinds of things that really go a long way in an RPG, like being able to see the enemies on screen rather than just having random encounters. And honestly, these games, they just hold up so great. And if you are somebody like me who grew up playing RPGs, and particularly JRPGs, in that 16-bit heyday, then I think these games will just appeal to you so much. The stories that they tell, the cast of characters are wonderful. Man, if you love games like Chrono Trigger or grew up playing Final Fantasy III, Secret of Mana, and games like that, you can't go wrong with these games. I highly recommend them. And yeah, super glad to manage to get both of them on the 3DS before they get too scarce. Next game I want to show you guys is Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. So, for those of you who are not familiar, the Fire Emblem Fates game released in 2 parts, not unlike the way that they sometimes do with Pokemon games. And the delineation between the 2 versions, Birthright and Conquest, is that you basically got to experience the storyline of a war between 2 rival nations from the perspective of each. And it was pretty clear that the intention was that Birthright lets you play as the virtuous baby faces in the storyline, and Conquest lets you play as the nefarious villains. I've not had a chance to play this game yet, so I'm looking forward to jumping back in. The Fire Emblem series is one of my absolute all-time favorites, and this completes my set on the 3DS, so very happy with that pickup. The next game I wanted to show you guys, also on the 3DS, is Professor Layton and the Azran Legacy. So there was a point of time where the Professor Layton games really felt, very ever-present and ubiquitous on the Nintendo DS family. There was a very successful range of those games on the original Nintendo DS, but then at a certain point of time, I think they perhaps went to the well one too often, and the series kind of flamed out in popularity. So Professor Layton and the Azran Legacy is in fact the very last game in the series to date that actually features Professor Layton himself. This game is actually quite hard to come by, I think, in reflection of the series' waning popularity towards the end. This game had a somewhat limited print run by the standards of the series, but I've always had a bit of a soft spot for these games. I enjoy the animation and presentation style immensely, and the puzzles are pretty neat too, so I'm glad I was able to pick up a copy of this one. And the next game I wanted to show you guys was Poochy and Yoshi's Woolly World. Now, there are variants of this game that you can get on the Wii U, and there are some, I guess, yarn-themed Yoshi games you can get on the Nintendo Switch as well. I think this particular version for the 3DS is actually one of my absolute favorites. And the reason for that is that it actually incorporates the 3D effect on the system really well. So not only do you have that really neat graphical style that you get with these Woolly World games, the 3D effect also sort of adds this element of making it kind of look like a playable diorama as well. I think if you've played one Yoshi's game of this nature, you've played them all, so you kind of get the sense of what the gameplay is like. But when it comes to presentation, yeah, I think this one's top of the pile for me, so really happy to pick this one up for 3DS. The next game I wanted to show you guys is Lollipop Chainsaw for the PS3. Now, this game had a relatively low profile when it came out originally, but in recent years it's actually become quite a sought-after collector's item for people in the PS3 market. It's a Suda51 game, so you know what you're signing up for if you are familiar with the likes of Killer 7, Killer is Dead, or No More Heroes. It's a very over-the-top action game where you play a cheerleader in a zombie apocalypse who is trying to save her boyfriend. One of the most notable things about the game is that it is written by James Gunn, who obviously went on to become a household name thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad. It's a super duper silly game. It's very fun, but don't expect too much by way of depth to the gameplay. I think this is absolutely one of these games where what you see is what you get. The next game I wanted to show you guys is Lego Jurassic World for the Xbox 360. I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Matt who gave me this game, so thank you very much for looking after me. I've been playing a ton of games with my daughter this year. She's turned 4 and has genuinely started to take an interest in gaming, and I think playing a game from the Lego series would be right up her alley. It's a franchise, the Lego games just seem like they just keep on keeping on, and I really have fallen off them. I'd only really sort of played the first couple of Lego Star Wars games and maybe one of the Marvel ones, but I don't think I've picked up one of these games for about 6 or 7 years at least. I understand that they've actually become pretty sophisticated in terms of their presentation, and they have voice acting and things like that, which the earlier games did not. I think she's actually a pretty big fan of dinosaurs as my daughter, so Lego Jurassic World I think will be the perfect game for us to play in co-op. I'm looking forward to it. The next game I wanted to show you guys is Need for Speed: The Run. Now, I think it's become quite obvious over the last few years that EA doesn't really know what they want their Need for Speed franchise to be. It has changed a lot from one iteration to the next, sometimes being a cops and robbers style game with Hot Pursuit, to other games that try their best to mimic the Fast and Furious street racing culture. Need for Speed The Run is, I guess, a bit of an anomaly in the series, in that this was probably one of the most story-centric games that they have in the series, and it's, I guess, a cannonball run style storyline where a group of racers compete for a cash prize as they race their cars from one side of the country to the other. It is a game that, as I said, is probably the most story-centric in the whole franchise. It tells a terribly cheesy tale of somebody who is in desperate need of money and has to overcome some baddies to get it. It's a game that has some hammy acting, some ill-advised quick time events, and you know what? I still kind of like this game. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me, and as someone that mostly likes arcade racing and doesn't take it too seriously, Need for Speed The Run is actually one of my favorites in the series, in spite of all its flaws. So not a very well-known one in the series, but if you're looking for something different, give Need for Speed a run a go. The next game I wanted to show you guys, Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Metal Gear series, so to get a set like this that collates not just the Metal Gear Solid games, but even the previous Metal Gear games as well, it makes me super happy to finally have a copy of this one. And it's also actually a really great game to have at the moment because the Metal Gear Solid remasters of the HD versions of 2 and 3 are currently not available for digital download as they're tied up in some licensing issues, I believe, with either some of the video footage in the cutscenes or the music. I can't quite remember. This is a fantastic set of some awesome games. The Metal Gear franchise obviously has lost its way somewhat since its creator Hideo Kojima left Konami, but I still love these games, so I hope perhaps the publisher Konami can find someone new to take over the reins, or if there's a way to get Kojima back one day to work on these, that would be great. But anyway, who knows what will happen in the future, but for now, just happy to have this game in my collection. And the next set of games I wanted to show you was some PC games. So we've got Warcraft 3, the Agatha Christie Double Murder Mystery Pack, and the big box version of Neverwinter Nights. Now, I've said it many times that I am predominantly a console gamer, but I happened to come across these particular games at a local flea market, and the person was practically giving them away. I think the set of the three of them cost me $10 total. And I have to say, I have a bit of a nostalgic sweet spot, particularly for the games that come, PC big box games like this, that come with the lid that flips open, a chunky manual that has a couple of hundred pages in there, with almost like a mini strategy guide in there. I have not played any of these games before, so I'm looking forward to trying to get them to run on my PC. I think they should go okay. I guess we'll find out. Neverwinter Nights in particular, obviously being a BioWare game, I do love all of their modern stuff, and I'm also a huge Agatha Christie fan as well, so to get a chance to play a couple of these games, and Then There Were None and Murder on the Orient Express, should be pretty neat. Warcraft 3, yeah, who knows? We'll see what I think of it. The next game I wanted to show you guys is Stray for the PS5. Now, this game was published by Annapurna, and it is a puzzle adventure game about a cat that goes to explores a world that kind of has, I guess, sort of some sci-fi trappings to it. It's kind of an unusual setting, really. This game turned some heads when it first came out, as people posted and shared footage of their own pets and cats sort of reacting to seeing the cats on the screen. And I have to say, I had the exact same experience. I have 3 cats in this house, and whenever I was playing Stray, this game would catch their attention, and they'd be up there pawing at the TV screen or just sitting there watching. I gotta be honest, I didn't even realize cats could actually tell what was on a TV screen until this game. Anyway, I think it's actually a game that has like a nice environment, and it sort of has a really sort of chilled out and pleasing vibe about it. Not enough games about cats, and you know what? Stray is actually a pretty good one of those, so I can highly recommend it. The next game I wanted to show you guys was the X-Files for the PS2. Now, the PS2 actually has a ton of great games where they translated, you know, popular TV shows and films into interactive games. The X-Files, I think, really is one of those. So it really does a fantastic job of capturing the vibe of the TV series. And in fact, it opens with, you know, it has a cold open where it sort of has a scene setting bit with some people fleeing like a mysterious comet. And then it actually cuts to the opening theme song of the show, you know, just exactly as it is. And it really lets you feel like you're playing an interactive version of an episode from the X-Files. It has the likeness and the voice acting from David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. And as far as the gameplay goes, it sort of, you know, plays like a survival horror kind of game. And even though the controls are somewhat janky, the great thing is if you play this game today, you can just access some cheat codes that can give you invulnerability. So that way you can just kind of focus on getting through the storyline and enjoying like the characters and the writing. If you're an X-Files fan, highly recommend checking out X-Files for the PS2. The next game I want to show you guys, Def Jam Fight for New York on the PS2. Now, this game actually has quite a reputation for being one of the best wrestling games of that generation. Now, although it is not a licensed WWE game or anything like that, it was actually developed by Aki Studios, who were most famous for making No Mercy for the Nintendo 64. And this particular game, a sequel to Def Jam Vendetta, takes everything that first game did and really fleshes it out and takes it to the next level. It has a fantastic all-star roster of hip-hop talent. So you've got the likes of Snoop Dogg, Method Man, Exhibit, and even the sort of peripheral characters in this game. You know, it has the likes of Henry Rollins and Carmen Electra in there, and Danny Trejo. It is just a really, really fun game. And there is a surprising amount of depth that you perhaps might not expect at first glance, but there is, you know, 5 different fighting styles in this game. There is a lot of environmental interaction to the combat, and the actual story mode itself is extremely well fleshed out as you take a, you know, character from humble beginnings and build them up to become a hip-hop legend at the end of the game. It's super fun to play. It has a ton of depth to it. And really, if you're looking for a game on the PS2 that sort of scratches that wrestling itch, then I think you could do a lot worse than checking out Def Jam Fight for New York. My next pickup is a 1 terabyte solid state drive. I picked up the solid state drive to put into my arcade cabinet, which I've had this system now for about 12 months, and I have used it predominantly for retro-focused games. So I'm talking about playing arcade games and shooters and fighting games from the arcade era of the 80s and 90s, but I thought it was time to pick up a solid-state drive so I could play some contemporary games on this system as well. So now that I've got this set up and I've got Steam running on my arcade cabinet, it's given me the opportunity to play out some modern fighting games from the comfort of my home as well. So I've been enjoying the likes of Tekken 7, Street Fighter V, Marvel vs. Capcom, and the Dragon Ball FighterZ series. Really all of the classic brawler and fighting games of the modern era I've now got up and running on my arcade cabinet as well. The next game I wanted to show you guys was the Spyro Reignited Trilogy for the Nintendo Switch. Now, I already own a copy of the Spyro Remastered Trilogy for the PS4, but the reason that I went back and double-dipped on this game is that I recently picked up a Nintendo Switch OLED, and that system has an absolutely fantastic screen when you play it undocked, and I was just looking for a nice, chilled-out kind of game that I could play that also took advantage of that screen, and the Spyro Remastered Trilogy, for me, was just the ticket. This is a game that just has beautiful animation, gorgeous looking graphics, the frame rate is buttery smooth, and for me it's just a pleasure to look at, and that was exactly what I was looking for in playing a game on my Switch OLED. The next game I wanted to show you guys was The Punisher for the PS2. This game was made by Volition Studios, who would go on to do the Saints Row series, and I think this is a fantastic action-adventure game. If you are a fan of the Punisher from the Marvel series, I think you owe it to yourself to track down a copy of this one if you can. I think this game really shows Volition as being a studio, you know, on top of their game, and obviously it probably comes as no surprise that they would really go on to, you know, find a mainstream hit with Saints Row. You could even sort of see it in this game. So even though it dates back to the PS2, I think the game controls really, really well. It is super satisfying playing as the Punisher with his arsenal of weapons. The damage that this dude inflicts on these poor criminals, holy cow, he just really goes to town on these people. And if, as I said, if you're in any way a fan, I think you owe it to yourself to track down a copy, because this game is super duper fun. The next game I wanted to show you guys was Half-Life for the PS2. Now, I forgot that they had done this particular version of the game for the system, and although it might seem a little bit unusual to experience a game like Half-Life on a console, for me, as somebody who is predominantly a console player, it actually reminded me that the first time I actually completed Half-Life 2 and, you know, episode 1 and 2 and Portal was through the Orange Box collection on the Xbox 360. So I myself have actually mostly experienced the Gordon Freeman series through console. And, you know, I picked up this game because it was going pretty cheap. And when I fired it up, I was originally just planning to just sort of check it out, just see how the engine would run and everything like that. And, you know, it actually hooked me in all over again. So that memorable intro sequence where you travel into Black Mesa and you meet all of the various scientists. Man, this game, obviously the graphics have aged a lot, but it is still just a beautifully crafted game. And if anything, it just made me kind of sad that Valve don't seem all that interested in you know, publishing many more of their own games, or if they do, it's super duper rare. Goes without saying, but Half-Life is a classic game. Experience it any way you can. It's just kind of a novelty. I have the opportunity to do so on the PlayStation now. Oh, looks like we're gonna have a cat break. Hi, Shadowfall. The next thing I wanted to show you guys, Stardew Valley, the board game. Now, both my wife and I are huge fans of Stardew Valley, as well as being a couple of massive board game nerds. So when this game was first announced, we were both absolutely stoked. And when you saw the trailer that showed what the contents of this Stardew Valley board game would look like, I mean, just look at this stuff. The artwork is just gorgeous, it's charming, it does a fantastic job of capturing the essence of the game. We can't wait to tuck into this one, get some mates over, and have ourselves a board game night playing Stardew Valley. Gonna be awesome. The last thing I wanted to show you guys today is the Miyoo Mini Retro Portable. This device will set you back around about $80, and as you can see, it has the form factor of a Game Boy with the portrait layout for the screen and the buttons, and will set you back around about 80 bucks. For my money, this is one of the best retro portable devices I have ever come across. For something that has such a small form factor, it is able to play not only Game Boy games, but it also plays Game Boy Advance, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Megadrive, all the way up to Sega CD, even PlayStation 1 is no problem for the Miyoo Mini. This device is a budget price system, and yet it has a fantastic vibrant screen that really makes the games pop. And although the stock operating system is not too bad, if you upgrade this guy with the Onion operating system, which has been developed by the community, it also adds a ton of fantastic extra features as well, such as the ability to jump between games at the double tap of a button. For my money, the Miyoo Mini is the best retro portable on the market today, and I highly recommend it. On that note, that completes another episode of Gaming Halls. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.